thinking about this because Norman, his graduation was like 3 weeks ago, and so we're all really, really pumped to that we can say that, we've gone through that whole cycle with the leader in our country in Nicaragua. It's really awesome.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about Norman Velasquez, quite a bit because he's involved in one element of your program, which is in the life skills curriculum, and I'm going to put a little teaser in here for everyone to stick around for the full hour, but it's a 3-day Respect for Women course, which is a cultural thing everywhere, but in a place like Nicaragua, it's even, got even, I think, deeper roots that prevents that equality and the opportunity for both boys and girls, men and women. So we're going to come back to that. But I also, you talked about the two founders, Brad Corrigan and Brett Hughes, finding that lacrosse, and of course they chose it because lacrosse chose them, that they fell in love with. But you talked about how in your on your website and how an unfamiliar sport can really create an effective learning environment. And we had a guest a couple of weeks ago. It was Harlem Lacrosse. Same thing, bringing lacrosse to the urban environments where it is usually the big three: basketball, baseball, football, or for soccer. The basic outdoor sports that the kids are seeing, and they don't always turn into the best environments for a variety of reasons. But just something different can allow kids to re-engage, relax their mind, and it becomes a learning environment, not an activity. So, let's talk about that a little bit. And for the broader audience, those whether it's bringing swimming to the urban area or gymnastics, because that actually talking with representatives from Project Play, which is the Aspen Institute, that's one of the things they're finding is that where kids need the structure, and again, the urban environment is one that definitely needs a lot of support. They're finding that boys wanted to do swimming and girls wanted to do gymnastics. There's an intrigue. I think there's also a safety as well, but it's different, and I think that different environment lets their minds relax and lets them develop. So can we talk about that just a little bit from how you see that? Forget about that it's lacrosse, just the lack of familiarity and its effectiveness.
Oh, I think it's super important. The fact that it's something new and different puts everyone kind of at the same level, regardless of how athletic you are. Specifically for us in lacrosse, one of the things we noticed is that obviously the kids that are really athletic want to come play because they're like, oh, it's a challenge for them, and so it's something interesting, and then they instantly kind of think that they're going to be the best lacrosse players because I'm really a soccer player and I'm really good a baseball player, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to do really well. But then they get a stick in their hands and they've never done that before, and it's so unfamiliar that now they're just as good as the kid that doesn't play soccer and doesn't play baseball. And everyone kind of, after the first 5 minutes, realizes, oh man, we're all on the same page here. I'm not better than anyone else. And now everyone's mind is almost like, okay, how do I get better? How can I learn? And it really sets everybody up for success in that sense. And I've noticed as well for us specifically is that once they've had that feeling of unfamiliarity and not knowing what's going on, it reminds them that whenever we have new kids come to our programs, that they were once that kid. And the environment that it creates, because they know it's unfamiliar, it allows us to teach, and it allows our older kids to help and teach as well. So it's all very circular in that sense. But in any sport that's not familiar, I think that sets you up for success because everyone has to be paying attention and everyone wants to get better. And so it lets you focus on learning instead of focus on competing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I sensed from the way you described it is that it develops that sense of empathy while being focused and goal-oriented, not being competitive in that zero-sum way.
Exactly.
That your worth has to be at the expense of someone else.
Right.
And vice versa, that someone else's success must mean that you are less. So when did they start thinking, or I guess how long is it before they go from thinking, yeah, I can do this, or I need to work hard at this, towards we can do this, and we need to work hard at it?
Everyone is different, but it takes a couple of weeks, I would say, especially if they're new to the program, to really get the culture of what our coaches and our volunteers are trying to instill. So it takes a few weeks, and then we do a lot of rewarding for, kind of reinforcing positive behavior. And one of the biggest things that we do is, and every month we do a field trip, and it's just basically taking the kids to a huge sports complex and just having like a sports day. We play lacrosse, frisbee, basketball. So like we just have a blast, and only the top 30 kids from each school go. And so it's that once they get to go to that and they realize, oh man, this is what we're working for, then it kind of clicks. So it's after that they've been in the program for about a month, and they understand that it's not just about me, but it's how I treat everybody else and how everybody works together, that it really settles in.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is I listen to what you're describing, and again, even whether it's out of country or just out of the more common, fully supported settings around this country, is that the model that you've got for those who have less is what's actually we're having less of in the supported areas, the suburban and more traditional areas where you've got the coaching, you've got the fields, the equipment, the support in the class and home, is that the sports is turning into sure, it's about the team, as long as I'm getting what I need from the team because I'm getting validated based on what I do for the team.
Right.
And it's these, you've essentially started from zero. And all these programs I hear about, it's you're able to go in without the bias, without the baggage, and to build it up. And I really hope a lot of people, and again, I want to talk now about how your practices are organized in a second here, because it's exactly how, whether it's U.S. Soccer, who we've had on with their national director for coaching and player education development, and I'm part of the program for U.S. Lacrosse. The way you describe this, I mean, this is what we are getting back to. It's going to take a few more years before it, seeps into, all the levels, high school, middle school, basic rec, and so forth. But before we go into your practices, I want everyone to know where to find this, because it only takes about 2 minutes, but you'll probably be on your website for 5 or 10 as I once you start clicking. But let people know where they can find the details on how you structure your program and how you execute things.
Sure. If you go to lacrossethenations.org, there's a whole section on our curriculum under the programs. It talks about how our practices are run and all the other things that we do as well, not outside of practice, because we definitely do a lot more than just lacrosse practices and our life skills stuff that we talk about in practice. From our meal programs, that supplements the nutritional needs of our kids, our scholarship program, which I talked about a little bit earlier, our tutoring sessions, which I haven't talked about, but it's part of what we do for our kids, is give them time where they can actually go, and it's basically study halls for them so that they can get their work done, and if they need help, they can ask for help and stuff like that. And obviously our coaches scholarship program as well.
Yeah, and that part I actually had missed, that there is a scholarship program that develops your coaches, which is, and that's the thing. We want to invest in the kids by getting a coach in front of them, and too often it is who's got the availability. And that's a great start. But those people often aren't as available as you think, and they need the training to, make to be effective while they're juggling things. So I think that's a pretty critical structure again that I think sports and even educational, and I'd say even in the workplace, when I look at the structure you have, it's definitely something to adopt in the for-profit academic business structure, because it is that I'll call it the mid-level of people that are working with those that you're truly trying to develop. The vast majority of the people in your organization that represent the results, whether it's, in this case, kids turning into better people or people, providing good service. You've got to take care of your next level of leaders who are the current level of teachers.
Absolutely. Our goal really is to take someone from our program and turn them into a teacher, a coach, and eventually a leader. Our ideal situation would be to have, an 8th grader start playing lacrosse, really fall in love with it, excel. We give him a scholarship so that he can go to school, and he becomes a leader on his team. And then when he graduates, we offer him a university scholarship in return for part-time coaching, and he becomes an assistant coach. And then as he goes through college and university, he becomes a full-time coach, and then he then gets his degree, finishes his degree, and goes on and does bigger and better things. And then we can bring another player, the next 9th grader who comes up through our program, and so on and so forth. So that it really becomes something cyclical, and the leaders are being developed from within the program itself, within the communities where we're working, because I feel like it's a little bit easier to be a leader and a role model when you are from that neighborhood and that community, instead of some American lacrosse player coming down to Nicaragua for 6 months and saying, hey, this is how we're supposed to do it. The kids tend to feed off of their coaches, their local staff more. Don't get me wrong, they love our American volunteers, and our American volunteers are a huge resource for our coaches and for our kids, and we rely on them quite a bit. But the teaching of how to respect women when it comes from someone that's 6 or 7 years older than you, who lives in your neighborhood, who you've seen your entire life, it strikes a different chord, as opposed to someone like Brett coming down from the U.S. and saying it. So being able to have that organic local leadership is just a huge point of emphasis for us.
Well, and I think that's something that's missed a lot. Not intentionally. I think we're just finding out now that there are a lot of people that do an awful lot of really good things, whatever their, I don't even hate to say niche because it really doesn't do justice, but when someone finds their passion, where it is that they are making big changes in people's lives, when they are able to take someone within that organization they visited to then be around, residentially, even if it's only a fraction of the breadth and depth that initial person can deliver, they're going to be just as effective in the short term and far more effective, I would say, in the midterm, who knows the long term, than that speaker is, even though they've got the books and the fanfare behind them, because the local person has the rapport.
Exactly.
I mean, it's we all remember things from way back when that somebody taught us. Doesn't matter what it was, whether it was a family, friend, coach, teacher, whatever it is. But the ones that you always remember, those stories, it's someone that you were around long enough to develop a rapport. And then the things that you remember, oh yeah, I remember I heard that once. You don't remember actually who that well-paid, well-trained, very talented person was, which has nothing, it's not a knock against them. It's just that they are throwing seeds. That's their job. And where, again, you have a program that can actually let them, grow that's the success. And like I say, your program is growing now. I'm curious.